Good evening. Thank you all for joining us for this Property Rights and Wetlands Tele-Townhall with Senator Rand Paul. As people continue to call in, I'd like to just add a couple things. Once we get started, at any time you can press *3 to ask Senator Paul a question. At that time, you'll be directed to speak with one of our staff members who will take down your question. When it's time for your question to be asked, I'll open the line to you and introduce you to Senator Paul. Again, that code is *3 to ask a question. But before we open the floor for questions, I would like to take a moment to introduce the lead sponsor of the Defense of Property Act of 2012, Senator Rand Paul.
Well, good evening, everybody. When I first ran for office, I was concerned about, the unelected bureaucracy up here. But since I've been here about a year, I've actually become alarmed at what's going on. And I read the story of Mike and Chantel Sackett back, 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 6 months ago in the Washington Times. And I was just horrified what happened to these people. And their case has now been heard before the Supreme Court, and we'll probably get a decision in the next couple of months. But it horrified me what ordinary people are going through in this country, really at the abuse and hands of their own government. The Sacketts bought a lot up near Priest Lake in Idaho. They, I think, paid about $25,000 for this lot. It's near a lake, but doesn't touch a lake. It has neighbors on either side of their lot and has basically roads around it. And they began to put some fill gravel on it because it was a sloped lot. There was no standing water on it. In fact, they've never seen standing water on their lot. They were basically hit with a cease and desist order by the EPA and began accumulating fines of, I've seen one report that said $37,000 a day, but then I've seen other reports that say the fine's actually been doubled and it's $75,000 a day. These are good folks, but did not have the means to hire attorneys to do this. But fortunately, they found a private property rights firm called the Pacific Legal Foundation, which since I've been reading and learning more about this, I've just been amazed with the work they've been doing really for years defending private property owners against the government. But they've been fighting this case, and it has gone all the way to the Supreme Court and been heard. And this really motivated me because I was in just a small town position a year ago, and I was like probably a lot of people on this phone call. I'd hear about this, read about it, hear something on TV. I'd get mad, throw stuff at my TV, but that was it. I couldn't do anything. But now I figured rather than just getting mad at what government is doing to our own citizens, let's try to fix it. And I guess what annoys me sometimes about the city of Washington is others up here just want to tinker around. They want to say, when the regulations come out, we'll try to stop them with a little bit here and there so they don't get more. And I guess I'm just fed up and say, why should government be doing this at all? So we looked into the background of where they think they get the authority to do this, and it basically goes back to the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act is fairly simple. It just says you can't discharge pollutants into navigable water. Well, that sounds good, and probably most of us on this phone call, property rights advocates included, we don't think companies or chemical companies should dump benzene or chemicals into rivers. There ought to be rules against that, and we should prevent that. But somewhere along the way, this mutated, and it mutated into something now where they actually believe that dirt is a pollutant, and they think a navigable water could be a low area in your backyard that when it rains hard collects some water. So this thing has just gotten literally out of control, and that's what we decided to sort of step in and see if there's something we could do about it. The other thing that worries us about this is it's not just like they're going to give the Sacketts a fine. Some people could be put in jail for noncompliance. And I'll tell you one story two quick stories. John Potsky was from Morrisville, Pennsylvania. He was given 3 years in prison because he bought a lot near his house that was an illegal dump. It had old rotten automobiles and a bunch of tires, over 5,000 tires. Some of them were clogging up a ditch and causing flooding. He picked them all up. He cleaned up the old rusted automobiles and began to put fill dirt in hopes of putting a business on this site. He was basically arrested and put in jail for 3 years. This was a guy who came to this country from Hungary to escape communism, loved his country, and his country put him in jail. And it just so disappoints me because It's not the origin of our country. It's not what we were founded upon. And he was put in jail for 3 years. One other quick story. Robbie Wrigley and her father and her father's partner were given 10 years in prison for a similar type story. They're developing some acres, residential area to sell, and the government came in and convicted them of conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act because they put, once again, clean dirt on low area of the land. But once again, land that wasn't holding water, even after Hurricane Katrina came in, which is like dumping 20 inches of rain over a couple of day period, there wasn't any standing water on this property. And yet they were put in jail. And for federal sentences, you can sometimes go to jail. Her dad got a 10-year sentence and probably will be in the entire 10 years unless he gets a presidential pardon. And so I just said, we have to do something about this. So what we did is we looked to the Supreme Court cases that had come through, and there was a case about 3 years ago called the Rapanos case. And this is a gentleman who was a developer in Bay City or Bay County, Michigan, and they convicted him of a crime, and it was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and his property was 20 miles away from the nearest stream. And this is what's unbelievable about the theories of the EPA and the Corps. They decided that because a bird might have sat in the Everglades and flown to his property in the Michigan, that a migratory bird rule or a migratory fowl rule was in place. So they could say that his land in Michigan was connected to the Everglades, and therefore it was an interstate water system because the bird that flew from the Everglades might have had a drop of water on it that it brought to a low area on his property. But basically, when his case went to the Supreme Court, we had a pretty good decision, but unfortunately it was a split decision, meaning it was 4 to 4 to 1. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we did get some things. Justice Scalia defined what a navigable water was, and he basically just said that a navigable water ought to be a stream or a river or an ocean, what we commonly understand to be that, but that the EPA and the Corps does not have unlimited power to regulate any low area of land. Unfortunately, they're not enforcing this, and so it's our hope that with the Sackett case that they'll further define it, and that maybe with the majority we have on the Supreme Court that we'll get back some of our property rights. This has occurred in some other instances. In my state in Kentucky, they regulate what are called ephemeral streams. And I asked the head of the mining committee, I said, well, do you have a map of the ephemeral streams? An ephemeral stream's not there all the time. Do you have a map of where you think they are? And he said, no. And I said, well, how do you know where to build a coal mine and where you can put some of the dirt that you move around if you don't know where the streams are? This same problem happened to the Sacketts. The Sacketts looked on a website to see if their land was listed as a wetlands, and it wasn't even listed. And yet they're being fined $75,000 a day. And when they said to the government, what about it? It's not even listed on your website. And the government officials just shrug their shoulders and say, well, guess not everything's on there yet. It's not really a perfect website. But this is the kind of stuff we have to get over and we have to do something about. Since the year that I've been up here in the Senate, the bureaucrats have written 55,000 pages of new regulations. The Senate has written about 1,000 pages. So you can see where the balance of power lies. What is really scary is that the unelected bureaucrats, I think, are more important than any senator in the country or any congressman. Now, they do get some direction from the president, but even a new president would have to be a real activist and someone who really believed in reining in the bureaucracy because it's growing out of control and it's unrestrained. This is one chance to fight back. We're really proud that a lot of people are starting to sign on and support this. And what we want is for any of those on the phone call who are interested is to call your senator, call your congressman, email them, and let's let them know that we want to take our property back, that property own, that private property is a basic and very fundamental American right. There are several groups who have endorsed the bill, and I wanted to thank some of them. The American Land Rights Association, which is headed by Chuck Cushman and has fought these battles for many years, has endorsed the bill. It's been endorsed by Freedom Works, which is a Tea Party group, as well as Americans for Prosperity. The Pacific Legal Foundation doesn't endorse things like this, but has written about the bill to explain it to people who are interested in property rights. And so we are starting this coalition, and I wanted to start tonight with a group of activists that have signed up and gotten on board. And if you will spread the word, I promise you, your congressmen and senators, while you may not think they're always paying attention to what you do, if you send them thousands of emails and thousands of letters on this, basically it's either emails or phone calls probably anymore, but if you will respond to them, we will get some action on this. The Senate bill is 2122, and it's called the Defense of Environment and Property Act. So far on the bill, we have Senators DeMint, Lee, Coburn, Ron Johnson, Orrin Hatch, and Pat Toomey. But we'd love to get more. It's going to be introduced in the House by Glenn Thompson from Pennsylvania. And if you want to call and thank him if you're from Pennsylvania, or try to get other sponsors for him in the House, we'd appreciate that. At this time, I'd love to turn it over for questions, and I'd like to get a little interaction or any kind of reports back from folks who are interested in this.
Thank you very much for that, Senator Paul. For those on the call, if you're interested in contacting your member of Congress, first let me give you a little bit of information on how to do that. You can call the Capitol switchboard at area code 202-224-3121. You can also find your member of Congress's contact information by accessing the congressional websites, which are www.house.gov or www.senate.gov. Also, if you would like to ask Senator Paul a question, you can press *3 now. Senator Paul, we're going to go to our first question, which is Scott from Bonner County, Idaho. He is from the same county as the Sacketts and would like to know how counties can support your bill.
Well, one thing you can do is if you have a property rights group in Idaho, that's one thing you can do, is talk to your property rights group. If you want to endorse our bill, you can send an email to my office saying you endorse it and that your property rights group is endorsing it. You can send emails to your senators and to your congressmen to get them on board with supporting the bill. And I think the Sackett case is pretty famous in Idaho now and really becoming famous across the United States. They've been interviewed by Lou Dobbs as well as others. That I think we can make this into, I think, a referendum. Some people in Washington seem to be a little bit shy about this. They want to just sort of look at the regulations, but they don't want to actually fix the problem. This bill would actually go a long way towards fixing the problem, but if you get involved, I think your representatives and your senators will listen to you if you call them.
Scott, did you have a question for Senator Paul to follow up with that?
Not really. I'd just like to say that what I was angling at is that if citizens contact their county commissioners or county legislative bodies and ask the counties to contact their congressmen to support the bill that Senator Paul's talking about, I think that sometimes can have more clout than just one individual making the contact, and that's I know our county commission is ready to support any bill that would prevent Sackett-like situations happening again in our area, and we'd also like to work with other counties. So if there's other conservative counties throughout the land, there could be a coalition of counties that promote legislation that would be favorable. So.
I think that's a great idea, Scott, because you know what it reminds me of? When they passed that eminent domain ruling, the Kelo ruling, where they took private property and gave it to somebody else, a lot of local cities and counties passed resolutions opposing it. So my small town in Kentucky, Bowling Green, Kentucky, our city commission actually passed a resolution saying that you cannot take property from one private property owner and give it to another. It has to be for a public use, like a road, a bridge, or a utility line, but you can't take it and say, we're giving your property to Pfizer, or you can't go to a church. And they've actually done this. You can't go to a church and say Walmart's going to pay more taxes. The church has to give up their property. So I think that's a great idea. If you have good conservative, either city council or county government, if you get them to vote just a resolution or even a rule within your community. And the interesting thing about Idaho is I've been told that Idaho has pretty good state rules on what a navigable water would be. Your problem is that the EPA is overriding your state rules because, Idaho is a pretty conservative state, but then you have federal rules overriding your state rules, and that's one of the things that I think this would help with is getting the EPA out of your hair.
Thank you very much, Senator Paul, and thank you, Scott. Our next caller is Tom. He's from Virginia, and he happens to be the president of the American Policy Center. Tom, you are on the line with Senator Paul.
All right, thank you. This is Tom DeWeese, Senator Paul. I'm ecstatic that you have introduced this bill. I've been fighting these issues for a very, very long time, and I know this is going to cut them at the knees if we can get this thing passed. You've kind of answered my question about what specifically we should do, who we should target, and we should go after, to build support for the bill. I know that there are groups like the Farm Bureau and the Home Builders Associations and those kind of groups that end up being very wimpy when it comes to getting something really, real strong legislation going. Any thoughts on what maybe we should do with maybe build support with those groups?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's disappointed me in Washington is that I came here and you want to fight these big philosophical battles and the industry sort of shies away. Even the industry that should be on our side on this issue wants to fight the small battle. They want to play small ball, not big ball. You can help us if your group wants to endorse the bill. Send us an email with a statement in the name of your group. Endorsing the bill would help. We have had some success. The Kentucky Farm Bureau from my state has now endorsed the bill and is doing very well. The National Farm Bureau has not, the American Farm Bureau. So if people are farmers on the line or know of people who are farmers in their family, if you can get them to write to the American Farm Bureau, that would help us with that. There are different groups out there, industry groups that we need. We also need the National Mining Association, which has every reason to defend property rights, and we haven't gotten them on board yet. So there are different groups that could help us in this battle, but really also your local group, if you have a property rights group or a tax group, if you want to endorse the bill, if we can show our other congressmen and senators up there that we have a list of a couple of hundred different citizens groups, county groups, state groups, I think that will impress them that this is a movement that they need to listen to us.
Thank you very much for that, Senator Paul. And for those listening, I have a link for you all to write down. If you would like to make a comment regarding this legislation, or if you're the leader of a civic or property rights group and would like to join in support of this legislation, you can contact our office directly, and I've made a short link. It's http://bit.ly/Rand Paul contact, all one word. Senator Paul, the next, also, if you would like to ask a question, you can press *3. The next question we have is from Chuck in Battleground, Washington.
Hi, Senator.
Chuck,
Go ahead.
You're on the line.
Senator, this is Chuck Cushman, and thank you very much for your comment about us and the American Land Rights Association. My intent was to ask you the three most important things that we could do to support your legislation. You've fairly well answered that, but maybe you want to address it. One thing I would comment on what somebody else said. They think that big organizations carry more weight. It's not that. It's not so. It's the one man, one vote really does count. The single letter really counts more than our big organizations, and we need to encourage that. But what three things would you like to see us do as individuals and as groups? And this will be a little bit repetitive, but to help support you and what you're doing. I mean, we're so grateful that you've taken the lead in this and you're doing such a great job.
Well, I think one thing people can do is the national groups that I'm aware of is your group, basically American Land Rights Association. If people want to communicate and look at your website and associate with that group, that's a good way to get involved in the property rights movement nationwide. I think, what we've talked about with county commissions, city commissions, state legislatures, there's a lot of conservative state legislatures. There's no reason why the Idaho state legislature shouldn't go ahead and have a resolution supporting the Sacketts and supporting a federal answer to this to get the federal government out of these problems in the states. And a lot of these problems would just be solved if you had them closer to home, because it wouldn't last long if you had a county agent coming to your property and telling you you couldn't put gravel on it. And so I think we really could go a long way in that. That was one of the sad things about the John Pottsky case. He cleaned up 5,000 tires, and you know what they told him? They told him as recently as a couple years ago that he's under an EPA order to make his property like it used to be. So what's he supposed to do? Take all the tires and put them back on his property? Government's just gotten ridiculous with these things. But I think email, phone calls, people will respond to it. There are certain groups that have influence. The farm bureaus do have a lot of influence in Washington. I've had a couple of congressmen and senators come up to me and say they're worried that their farm bureau is not going to support this, and so that does have influence. So not having the American Farm Bureau on board yet really does hamper some of this, and they do throw weight around in the farming communities. And if we had a lot of letters and phone calls to the American Farm Bureau and to your local Farm Bureau, I think that has a big influence. And the thing is I haven't met a farmer who's not in favor of this. When I talk to farmers about whether they can dig a ditch or whether or not some of their bottom land is useful, whether they can plant a tile, basically their property's taken from them. You might have 100 acres, and they might tell you can't farm 40 of your best acres, that floods in the bottom land, and you can't dig ditches to channel the water away to make the land usable. So, I think farmers are definitely in our camp on this, and every farmer that I've met in Kentucky, all I have to do is mention the EPA to get them riled up. So we need to take that anger and that problem we're having and channel it into something useful. But I think all of those things will help.
And you can contact your members of Congress by calling the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121. Senator Paul, the next caller on the line is Meryl, and she is from Pennsylvania. Meryl, you should be on the line.
Hello. You can hear me, Senator?
Yes, go ahead, Meryl.
Hi. I think it's terrific, and, the story of the Sacketts that you used is it's a problem. But I have a question for you. Is this bill only limited to the definition and control of navigable waterways, or is it a little far more reaching when you talk about things like protecting the rights of states to have primary authority over land and water within their borders? Is it only applicable to...
Yeah, those are good questions, Meryl, and I didn't fully state it, so let me tell you a couple other things. Basically, the other things that this does is if they come and take your property anyway, let's say they still say it's a wetlands and they take it, they have to pay you for your land. So if you can't use your farmland and they've taken it, they have to pay you double the value of your land. It also says they have to have a judge's order or a warrant or your consent to come onto your land in the first place. And with regard to states, it says protects the rights of states to have primary authority over the land and water within their borders. And that's part of the problem because some states actually have good and reasonable rules, and the federal government's coming in and usurping those rules. So I am a big believer in letting states and localities, and to tell you the truth, I'm a big believer in clean water. I'm a big believer in not having pollution in water. You should not be allowed to pollute your neighbor's land. But at the same time, we've gone crazy with this stuff, and it's no longer about polluting rivers and lakes, which should not occur. It's about some guy moving a truckload of dirt or sand onto his property and going to jail. So we've just gone too far.
Thank you, Senator Paul. The next caller we have. Also, if you'd like to ask Senator Paul a question, you can press *3 now and speak with one of our staff members who will put you in the question queue. The next caller, Senator Paul, is Pamela from Miami. Pamela, you should be on the line.
Hi, Senator Paul. I'm in Miami-Dade County, and first of all, thank you very much for coming up with this bill. We've experienced this firsthand in Miami-Dade County. We've had a large number of farmers whose land has been declared wetlands after they've used it for a long time, and all of a sudden, years later, they've come along and said it's a wetlands, and just what has happened to the Sacketts is happening to these people. I want to ask you two questions. One is, Marco Rubio, we have approached about what's happening in Florida, so he's well aware of this type of thing. Have you asked him, or has he contacted you about coming on and help supporting this bill?
He's aware of the bill, and I think he is a good person I think he's a good person, and I think he's a good person for you to communicate with. And I would definitely recommend calling him, writing letters, writing email to him. And I think there's a very good chance he will, but I can't speak for him. And I think encouragement helps, and there's a lot of good people I'd say there's probably 15 people that should be on this bill, and we have about, 4, 5, 6, we have like 7 at this point. So there's another 8 to 10 people who are pretty good conservatives, believers in property rights that need to be on this bill. And what will happen is once we get to a critical number of about 10 or 15, we'll get more on. But we have some opposition from Republicans right now is the problem. Now, Marco's not one of them, but there are Republicans opposing this bill because they are afraid it'll rile up the environmentalists. And I keep trying to explain to them the environmentalists are always riled up, and they're going to continue to be riled up. And I think we have the strength of this argument because nobody, myself included, none of us are arguing for pollution. I'm against pollution. It should be unlawful to pollute your neighbor's property, but your own property, putting dirt on your property should not be pollution, should not be a crime, and we shouldn't have people in jail for that.
Thank you, Senator Paul. The next question is from Barbara in Florida regarding the House bill.
Hi, Senator Paul. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I just wondered, you mentioned that Congressman Thompson was going to be introducing a bill. Do you happen to know that number yet, or is that do we just need to research it to find it?
Yeah, I don't know it yet because it hasn't actually gotten introduced. He's told us that he will introduce it. They are out of session this week and will probably be back next week. We thought it would be introduced by this phone call, but it's not yet. But I think that's just a glitch, and it should be next week. So if you're trying to contact your House members, next week would be good. You've got several new good congressmen down in Florida that you should get on this bill. And you've also got some that have been there for a while that ought to get on this bill, too. So I think we should. There's no reason why we shouldn't have 5 or 10 congressmen from from Florida. So I think we keep working on your congressmen down there, and I think we'll get them. But maybe wait till next week. We'll put it out on our website and have the bill for you for the House next week.
And our website is www.paul.senate.gov. The next call is from Joy in Flagstaff, Arizona. Joy, you should be on the line.
Yes, hello, Senator Paul.
Hello.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. We're Grand Canyon River rafters out here in Arizona, and believe it or not, we've been having issues even with whitewater rafting with this navigable water situation. It is crazy. And I guess my question to you is, do you think that all of this insanity is really based on Agenda 21?
Well, I don't know. Agenda 21 is this thing from this UN plan to control land, and possibly, but can't say I'm an expert on that. You know what I'm interested in, though, if you're still on the line, what is the problem? What are they doing with whitewater rafting?
Well, they have actually tried to say that, and right now I think we have it abated somewhat, but they had actually tried to say that we would come under Coast Guard rules and regulations on the Colorado River through Grand Canyon, and that is pretty amazing. We have been able to hold that back because we're a National Park Service concessioner, and the National Park Service was able to convince the Coast Guard that they would be the regulating body for our commercial outfitting operations. So right now, that seems to not be a problem, although it keeps rearing its head every several years. But it just goes to show how ridiculous all of this is.
Yeah, send us the story. Put that in, encapsulate that into an email, and send us a story of some of the problems you're having with that, because the stories are good for us to repeat. Because I think when people hear the anecdotes of those who are being, basically tormented, this goes beyond even your own private property. I'll give you a quick story. We have a small city in Kentucky that when it rains, the raw sewage overflows the sewage plant, goes in the river. Nobody wants that, but the city wants to build a new sewage plant that's bigger, that would handle the sewage better and wouldn't allow the sewage to go in the river. And they want them to do an environmental impact study that will cost $100,000 and take a year. And it's like, well, we just need a bigger sewage plant. Can't we just agree and do this? But it's just government getting in the way of things that we know we need to do. Maura, we can go to the next question.
Absolutely. Senator Paul, we have Joe from New Jersey who has a question that I think might fall right in line with the budget you introduced last week. Joe, you should be on the line.
I think that's John.
Oh,
all right, John.
Oh, that's fine. Hi, Senator.
Okay, John.
This is John Anthony from New Jersey. And first, I want to thank you so much for S2122, because you read stories about the UK and the regulators over there and how much power they've amassed. And members of Parliament say it's almost a standing joke. Don't even come to us. We can't do anything. Just go to the regulators. And I see that same thing happening here. And here's a line in the sand where you're saying, we can push back and begin to stop that. So this is so much more than just about navigable waters, in my opinion. It's about putting a halt on the progression of these legislative activities, regulatory activities that are taking place. So thank you very much. One thing that occurred to me is you've got some great senators here, and you didn't mention everyone by name, but I know there's several, including Senator Inhofe, who comes to mind. I know that folks like that have a really good handle on what's going on with the EPA. They understand about property rights. I know the senator just wrote a really terrific book about the loss of property rights. I think it was called The Greatest Hoax or something. So there's a lot of that out there. Why do you feel it is that we're having difficulty getting them to buy on in the very beginning? Is there something that needs to be said or done? And again, above and beyond the things that you said, call your senator, write the emails, make the calls. What might be the tactic, the strategy, the approach that we need to take, or the words that we need to use to convince good people like this to come on and join in this cause?
I think it's not necessarily a fundamental disagreement. I think a lot of the Republican caucus in particular is in favor of this. But I think sometimes, particularly in Washington, people get a strategy, and their strategy is to move the ball just a little bit. We just need to gain they've been pushing us down the field, and we need to gain back 1 yard. And sometimes people think that fundamental change, where we actually go and attack the whole problem and we fix it, they say, oh, that'll never pass. But I guess my argument to them is, let's really be for something. Let's be for what would fix the problem permanently. And if we have to compromise along the way, let's at least start with what we believe in. And then maybe the compromise isn't as good, but we at least started with what we believe in, instead of starting in the middle. And then when we compromise, we get almost nothing, or it becomes useless. And some people just think that you do better doing smaller incremental change. But I told people I wouldn't have left my, medical practice, and I spend a lot of time away from my family now. I wouldn't have done all this if I really just wanted to come up here and say that I defeated one regulation. I really want to correct problems like this. We're also fighting this with the Gibson guitar case. I have legislation, and we'll talk about that on another phone call. But basically, you should not be convicted of foreign laws. And it just takes a while for people to get up and start getting into really changing things. But I would say that of the 47 members of the Republican side of the Senate, I would say probably 40 of them on this issue are influenceable. So all of these people that you think are potential gets, let's write them, let's call them, and let's see maybe if they'll come our way.
If you have a question for Senator Paul, you can press *3 on your phone. If you want to contact your members of Congress, you can call them at 202-224-3121. Now, Senator Paul, we will go to Joe from New Jersey, who has a question that might have something to do with our budget introduction from last week. Joe, you should be on the line.
Thank you. Senator Paul, thank you for your efforts in this regard. I am from New Jersey, and we have two Democratic senators who I hope to make aware of this problem and convince, and I think letter writing and emailing. Just a general question to you, first of all, is do you think emails are less effective than handwritten letters, or do you have any feedback on that? And the second thing, more importantly, is there any way to defund these regulatory agencies? It seems to me that in order to pick these targets that you've mentioned, they're pretty small targets. Do they have that huge a network that they can pick and choose these people, and can we defund them, or is that a line item in the budget?
As far as handwritten versus email, I think people do read all your emails. My office tabulates how many. I don't read every individual one because I think we got 230,000 last year. But we do know what the sense is of people who are sending them in, and that's why numbers of emails count. Old-fashioned letters are good, too, and they get read. It's slower because our mail, because of the security threats, it sometimes takes us 3 months to get a piece of mail because it goes through a lot of processes. The second part of your question was, can you help me out again, Joe?
Senator Paul, I apologize. I think that we have taken him off the line.
That's fine. Do you have either another one, or can someone remind me the second part of the question?
We have a question here from Thelma in Texas. Thelma, you're on the line.
Hi, Senator Paul. Thank you
for
this bill. We need it badly. My question is there any way that we can get hearings for these individuals who have been so damaged by the EPA declaring their land as either wetlands or affected by the navigable waters or whatever? Can we get hearings on them?
Good. That's a good question. In fact, it reminds me of the second part of the last gentleman's question on defunding. Defunding the agencies is a good idea. The problem is we pass it through the House, which we've done numerous times, comes to the Senate, and Harry Reid won't even let us vote on it. And then even if we pass the Senate, we got to get it through the President. So before we do defund anything, Obamacare or any of these horrendous things they've done, you need a new president, and you got to get a majority in the Senate, or get very close. And so we can do this, but it's going to take another election. On your question on hearings, we had an unofficial hearing and had 5 or 6 people come in and testify on this, but we don't control the agenda in the Senate side. So we can't have hearings in the Senate because, on the committees that I'm on, I don't have any say in what happens in the hearings. The majority has complete control in the hearings. In the House side, we can. So when we get a House bill introduced, we could bring some of these folks in for hearings in the House, and they're doing some of that good stuff over there. They are looking at some of the EPA abuses, and it's occurring. The problem is it's all being sent over and it's dying in the Senate. And I don't think we're winning the PR battle. I don't think the public knows that a lot of good stuff is happening in the House. In fact, I think nobody hardly in the public knows any of the things that are passed in the House, because I don't think we're doing a good enough job of publicizing those and publicizing the fact that they're dying because of Harry Reid. One man is basically stopping any good legislation from going through the Senate. So that's a big problem right now.
Senator Paul, we have Darlene from Gainesville, Florida on the phone. She is a realtor, and Darlene, you should be on the line.
I am. Thank you very much, Senator. It's enjoyable to listen to some common sense for a change. I've been a realtor for almost 40 years here in the state of Florida, and I have seen private property rights being deteriorated. Have you heard of a new group that has started through the country called Property Rights Council?
No, but I'm glad you brought it up, and we will follow up with them. Property Rights Council?
Yes, sir. It's about 10 attorneys through the country. They started in October, and they're trying to get local, like commissioners and things like that, to work, and citizens. It's going to be a point. They're trying to get just citizens involved with private property rights when the local jurisdictions start taking private property rights away as downzoning and things like that, and then not paying for compensation, as you were talking about, when they do this. So, I will email you this information if you like, because I think it's something, because it's going to be, people are tired of government taking away our rights, and I've seen it for my many years in real estate.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Darlene. I think it's a good idea. And, you could also get them to communicate with the American Land Rights Association. Their website is landrights.org. And that way we're all sort of communicating and we're all on the same side of these issues. We can get better networks going of all these groups. But I'll look forward to finding out more about the Property Rights Council and see if they can help us spread the word on this bill.
Senator Paul, thank you for that. We have time for two more questions, but first I wanted to remind everyone that if you want to contact your member of Congress, you can go through their congressional websites. You can find them on www.house.gov or www.senate.gov. If you'd like to contact our office directly, you can go to http://bit.ly/Rand Paul contact. Senator Paul, the next question we have is from our home state of Kentucky, and Marvin is on the line.
Hello.
Hello, Marvin.
Yeah. I work in the mining industry, and my question basically is, will this bill provide any recourse for the mining industry, property rights, whether they own the property outright or whether they hold a lease on the property and are not able to mine as they had planned?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it does, because one of the problems that mines have is the government comes in and says, oh, that's a stream, and really all it is a crevice. It's a crevice that when it rains hard, the water runs down the side of the mountain, and they call it a stream, but it's not really a stream. It's just an area where the water runs off. And if the mining company puts dirt in that crevice, they then say you're interrupting a stream, but nobody knows whether it's a stream or not because the government, the EPA and the Corps doesn't have a list of where the streams are, so it becomes very arbitrary. But this bill would help them. And if you're in the mining industry, though, you can help us by calling the National Mining Association and letting them know that you'd like them to endorse our bill. They, I think need some encouragement from folks in the mining industry, and I think if they did, we could go a lot farther if we actually had some people in industry that were helping on this bill.
Senator Paul, thank you so much, and Marvin, thank you for your call. Our final question this evening is from Debbie in Virginia. Debbie, before I put you on live, I would just like to remind those on the call that you can also visit our website, www.paul.senate.gov, and you can contact us through that as well. Debbie, I am putting you on the line now.
Thank you, Senator Paul, so much for this bill. My question, and we talked to Congressman Griffith about this recently, is because the EPA and all of the big arms of government operate under a charter, basically, permission and authority from the Congress, we hear everybody complaining about the EPA, but we don't really see a movement to change the charter and limit their authority. And I don't know what it would take to start that, but here in Pulaski County, Virginia, you can't dig a hole in your yard in the town unless you receive counseling from a federal employee associated with the EPA. I just had that experience personally.
I can believe it. And you're right. I think that's another good idea, and we have staff on the line there listening, that looking at the fundamental mission and charter of these agencies is important. It'll probably take another election to get any of the things like that through, but I agree with you. Let's start thinking about it. So, yes, absolutely. Let's look at the fundamental charter. In fact, the EPA apparently was not even approved initially by Congress. My understanding is that President Nixon did it by executive order. So really there's a problem right there that Congress should be the one voting to create agencies, not the president, and Congress should have some oversight. Really, we've done this to ourselves. George Will is good about writing about this. He writes about how we've abdicated our power. It's not that someone took Congress's power or the people's power. We just gave it up. We gave it up to the bureaucracies so we could get it back. But this is why I want to start a movement with this. I want, the several hundred people that are on the phone call tonight to go out and tell their friends, get their local groups involved, and let's become a movement such that we take our government back. I mean, we need to do it because it's not only the abuse from this, but then it's just the money that all this stuff costs. We're running this massive debt. $50,000 a second is being borrowed. So we really do have to do something and do it fast. For those of you who have been on the phone call, thank you for participating tonight. If you're interested in doing this again, send us an email and tell us. We have another thing that we're doing on the Gibson guitar case and reforming the Lacey Act. It's a pretty specific bill, but it talks about some really egregious things the government is doing And really a lot of this is causing regulations that people break to be a crime and putting people in jail for regulatory breaches, which really needs to be corrected. And we're going to keep working on this. But if you're interested, let us know, and we may try to do this again in a few weeks or about a month. But thanks, everybody, for participating.
Thank you all very much for joining the call. And if you would like to get more information on this bill or others, you can visit www.paul.senate.gov. Thank you all very much, and have a wonderful evening.